Hi, Darren Hunter here. A lot of agencies throughout Australia, New Zealand and the United States are charging for renewal of leases, but there are still a lot of agents that are not charging and a lot that aren't charging enough. Now, the lease renewal itself is like an insurance policy that protects the owner against a lot of issues that can happen if the tenant vacates a property on a non-fixed term or a periodical lease. And so what we need to understand is the actual cost involved of a non-fixed term agreement. So for example, let's say a property is, tenant gives notice in a quiet time. And let's say it takes 5 to 6 weeks to be able to secure a new tenant. And the rent is $500 a week. Well, that's $2,500 to $3,000 in a loss already with a tenant on a non-fixed term agreement. And then if there's any releasing costs, of course, let's say 2 weeks rent and a marketing fee, but the leasing fee of 2 weeks rent is already $1,000. So we're already talking $3,500 to $4,000 that the owner has to fund if a tenant leaves on a non-fixed term or a periodic lease during a quiet time. Now, my point is this. Yes, I understand you saying, well, Darren, we're renting properties really quickly. Sure, but that's not always been the case, has it? And it won't always be the case. So when you're talking to owners, you can say, look, in a worst case scenario, in a quiet time, this is what can happen on a non-fixed term lease. That example or scenario is still very, very valid to talk about quiet times. Okay, my point is this, that non-fixed term agreement for a tenant to leave under those circumstances where the owner's got to pay rent until a new tenant moves in, plus also releasing costs and perhaps marketing, that cost alone is $3,500 to $4,000. That is a very expensive fee to have a tenant on a non-fixed. Now, my point is this. If the cost to get the tenant locked into a fixed term lease renewal is far less than that, then that's a real bonus because now the fixed term lease renewal protects the owner against that sort of thing happening, because in a normal scenario, if the tenant does vacate during a non-fixed term agreement and breaks the lease and it's a quiet time, well, of course, the tenant's got to pay rent until a new tenant moves in, plus also part or full of the leasing costs. Now, all of those costs or most of those costs now have to be borne from the tenant. So if that is the actual loss that the owner can expect on a non-fixed, then why wouldn't you charge half a week's rent or 1 week's rent fee for a fixed term lease? Now, for some of you out there, I understand New South Wales, I understand your legislation's pretty bad and doesn't allow a lot of those costs to be replaced. But still, at this point, there is still a lot of benefit for the owner to be on a fixed term lease instead of allowing the tenant to naturally default onto a non-fixed. And I get it in places like Victoria and New South Wales, and also in New Zealand, where you cannot obligate a tenant to sign a fixed term lease renewal. I get it, but you can highly encourage and you can pursue and you can sell the situation to the tenant and sell them the protection they get, that if the owner, for example, sells, the tenant is still guaranteed the lease. There's still protection there. And not just throwing away the need for a fixed term lease renewal just because your legislation doesn't allow you to obligate the tenant. Far out. My opinion is if you then, under those legislative circumstances, go and pursue the tenant, encourage the tenant to sign up a fixed term and you get it, you deserve your lease renewal fee even more. All right, really easy to justify too. In my book, The PM Fee Script Secrets, I give you the full justification for a lease renewal fee and also the scripts to use as well. Now, this book, along with a lot of other fees that you can charge, but also how to overcome, but the other agent is cheaper, or if you can match your management fee with the other agent. Even my Sydney agent only charges X. Every type of fee objection you can think of, we've covered in this book. Now, the book is free. All you've got to do is pay for shipping. We've paid for the printing. Just go to stopdiscountingfees.com, or really easy, go to igtcentral.com for all of our books and all of our podcasts. Take care.